Everyone, this is Sukanya,
And I'm Nishtha.
and we welcome you to yet another episode of Intersectional Feminism Desi Style, brought to you by Feminism in India.
Up until now, actually, in this podcast, we've spoken a lot about OTT, which has really become a reality and a huge part of how we consume content in the past year because of whatever the global circumstances were. We didn't have the space to actually go out and enjoy films as a collective as we did before. But now we have had the advent of OTT, and we see that the freedom to watch content when you want to watch content and having more of it available on your fingertips and having more pan India content available for us, we've seen that content consumption patterns have been changing a little bit, albeit slowly, but they have. And somewhere, very rigid lines between, this is a mainstream film and this is an indie film and this is masala and this is art house, and those lines are kind of blurring. And because of this blurring, even the way in which we engage with this content has kind of blurred. However, has it really, or is that a perception of our echo chambers? How much more do we have to go when we look at blurring of content, not just in terms of the banners and the manner in which it's presented to us, but also what are the stories that we're looking at, who is desirable on screen, who isn't? These are a couple of things that we are hoping to dive into when we speak in this episode.
Today, we have with us an artist we love for her versatile transitions into characters on screen. She started her career as a theatre actor and moved to New York to pursue educational theatre academically, where she also taught theatre to the inmates of a high security US prison. She has starred in films across geographies, including an Australian film and multiple Indian language films. We recently saw her and loved her on our OTT screens in Rohena Gera's Is Love Enough Sir, for which she also won the Filmfare Award for Best Actress in the Critics category. We have with us the illustrious performer who has pleasantly devastated us with her nuanced performances, Tillotama Shome. Hi, Tillotama. We're so thrilled to have you on our show.
Hi, Sukanya. Hi, Nishta. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's just jump right into the conversation. We have so much that we want to talk to you about. Now, you've
Okay.
had a career that has spanned 2 decades and you've done some really interesting and unique roles, starting from Monsoon Wedding with Meera Nair, which I believe, fun fact, was the process started while you were still in college, right?
Yes.
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 So I wanted to ask you, can you tell us a little bit about your approach of how you pick films? And also, since we talked about how it's been 2 decades now, has there been a change from when you started to how you approach films and scripts now?
I think there lots has changed. It's been 2 decades. One never thought one would use decades in a sentence while talking about one's own life. I still come from that place where we talk about it as a film and not as content. But it seems a very corporate, a very corporate kind of term for the work that is born out of like a creative collaboration of many people who have to come together in a particular moment for something to work. So I think the biggest changes, biggest and perhaps the most palpable change is moving from film, to a digital world. The discipline with which one worked when you know that film is finite, there's only so much of it, and it costs a lot of money. A director called Action, and Monsoon Wedding was, my first film, since you mention it, and we shot on film. And the sense of preparation that went behind is not something I'm nostalgic about. It's something I'm really happy that I went through that process, because it's something I can choose to carry, whether even when I'm working in the digital world now, which
Right.
has its own, challenges and strengths. And but I really like the idea of approaching a scene with the awareness that an entire crew and cast have to come together to make that moment work, and we may not have a take two. You know, it's a lovely way of working. And of course, there is a take two, even when you were shooting in film. But you really used and understood the value of it. And it wasn't like, oh, I messed up. It's okay. We'll just take. Sorry, huh? We'll just do one more take. Uh, I mean, they, I mean, I can't even imagine speaking like that. And I didn't hear anybody speak like that on the set of Monsoon Wedding, and there were veterans on that film, you know. So there was none of that. Oh shit, I just made a mistake, just forgive me, guys, so sorry, just hungover, need my coffee.
Yeah.
uh and none of that. So it comes with that kind of I really enjoy, and I'm very lucky that I got that.
Right, Tillotama, in a recent interview, you've said that the audience has given you the space to look beyond commercialism and, sort of aided you in practicing your craft in a way that makes you satisfied as an artist. So, when you think about that, what do you think are some of the main things that have helped in this change in viewing patterns of audiences, which has also impacted the way and the space with which actors can mold themselves in, pick interesting content or pick content that resonates with them, or even generally the generation of more, diverse content? What would you attribute this change to? What are the layers that you've identified in this whole process of content, changing?
I think one of the things that I really like, whether I like a story as much or not, I really like the fact that there's a multiplicity of voices and languages which one can, open an OTT platform and watch films in various languages, and I really like that. Sometimes it becomes like the Tower of Babel, and there are too many, too many things happening. But that's like any kind of freedom, right? You suddenly get the freedom to do, to not have, let's say, censorship, or to be able to tell whatever kind of stories. So there will be the lowest hanging fruit, which just takes that freedom and is like, oh, we are free, we can do anything, and just goes nuts and crazy, and there's not much thought into the work, put into the work. So there is also that flip side of, sometimes there isn't enough work that goes into putting the work out there, just because one can, and so there is that danger of sometimes really crazy timelines. Uh, and I've never worked like that before, but it's becoming, it's quite common, is being told that, this is the film, and you get really excited, and this is the character, and you have to really work, and maybe you have to learn a dialect or a language. And so I'm used to like having many, many months of prep, from when the film comes to when we shoot. And nowadays it's like, yeah, so it's in 2 weeks, and it's like what? It's like, what kind of, way of working is that?
Yeah.
So these are some of the realities and challenges of working within a system which has that kind of open playing field, a sense that it's, there's so much happening, there's so many things being made, we need so many actors, and there's so many languages. And so it's really like it's open. I think it's beautiful in the way it's opened the audience to accessing various kinds of actors who speak in different kinds of tongues, and I'm really happy for that. Um, and uh, and really what Chintuka birthday and then Sir did, was, really it suddenly our films and our work had an audience that we never had any access to, because I mean the indie films would just release in a few theaters, if at all, in India. But it
Right.
was more international film fest. It didn't matter how well your film did in international festivals. You could win the most coveted award, but there was nothing from your country supporting its distribution.
Right.
So the sense of national pride of representing your country in a foreign festival and winning something was, it's quite like humbling, that okay, great, but it means almost nothing in your
Yeah.
own country back
Mm.
home, you know
Absolutely.
that no one is actually going to see it. That's what the truth is, and and one learned to work with that topography, that whether, even if my film is just watched by a few people in my own country, which meant a sense of anonymity, uh, a greater sense of freedom, um, and to try new things, without any kind of baggage or pressure of having to uphold any kind of standard. because anyway you're not part of the mainstream. So what standard are you going to? And if you take you know you're not upholding your you're not at the holding up some cultural values of a particular group. You're just an actor. You're a freewheeling artist uh, who is not in the mainstream and hence doesn't have to follow its code. What is a successful film? What's a viable film? And that freedom has its own high. So you tend to travel a lot and by that I mean your work is you get accessed and called upon by filmmakers from various parts of the world. You get to go to film festivals and see the kind of stories that people are trying to tell. How that is such a how it's a response, it's a visceral response to the times that we live in. And so you keep getting extricated from the pond that you exist in. You keep getting extricated from it and see that, oh my god, there's this whole new world out there. Then you come back to where you are and relearn and relook, and that kind of begins to shape you. It's not a constructed choice that one has made thinking too much. It's really just how it's happened with with the OTT platforms. Suddenly you have the same actors like me, who suddenly our work is seen by so many people. It's very strange. It feels like, what happened? Is everyone well? Like, did I miss that great book that came out and everyone read it and they've just changed? They just love now different kind of cinema. Like, they just want to wake up to a different world. And it was astonishing when that happened.
Yeah. Also something that we ourselves are trying to deconstruct through the course of this podcast, because some things haven't changed and it's disappointing that they haven't changed, but some things have, and we're just trying to pinpoint what it is that has. And in this pinpointing of what has changed, one thing that keeps coming up in conversation between me and Sukanya and our guests, is that there now seems to be a bit more value for vulnerability, even when we talk about like the feminist movement, and even when we talk about um, bringing change. There is more value for the softer stories, which at one point in time it almost felt like everything had to be on this grand canvas, and like the real human emotions were somehow kept away, and people had to be swept off their feet, so they had to make these grand gestures of love. And now vulnerability is being given a little bit more value, because also maybe perhaps of the physical setting in which you're watching these films. But coming now at like coming to the next part of what we wanted to talk with you about, and that is to do with vulnerability and forgiveness. um, People know of your stellar work, but we want to know a little bit more about your time doing theater therapy in that high security prison in New York. What made you want to do that? What lessons of forgiveness and retribution and love and mistakes did you pick up there, if any? And does that impact you today as a person, as a performer? Just a little bit more about that time in your life.
Um, so there's a professor called Chris Vine, and when I was looking at drama therapy, because I know what happened to me in LSR doing theater, was that it really helped me get over a physical disability of the stammer that I have, which is my father has that speech pattern. I inherited it, and doing theater really helped me bypass that. And I was very curious about what really happened, because I know something happened. I just didn't have the language for it. And as I was looking and searching, I understood and came across the idea of drama therapy, and how drama can be used for therapy and can be used in spaces where the chalk and talk method uh, is not very effective, and especially in interventions. Um, Often you are telling someone what they already know. They know this is not right. It's like saying, right, you can't hit someone. It's bad. Yeah, yeah, I know that. Yeah, yeah. So you can tell someone 100 times, 1,000 times that this is not good. They already know it. So So I think the idea of drama, of role playing, of entering a particular person, really is a very, very simple and elegant and an effective tool for intervention in such places which go beyond good and bad. So that's when I realized that, okay, this is something that really interests me. Um, Figuring out, and then the more I read, I was really taken in by Chris Vine and his way of working, and I saw that he teaches at NYU. So I applied for at NYU, and not because it was NYU at all. I would have gone wherever he was. Uh, so I went there. Of course, it's not like I went there. It took many years to go there. Like, your all your exams, and then applying for scholarship for years. Like, it took a long time. And then, as I started studying, I realized that I really actually I was getting so much from him. And he had a company called the Creative Arts Team that he was a creative director of. And I realized that actually I don't care about NYU at all. I actually just want to work with this man. And what I realized in doing that job is that a good drama therapist, a good process worker, is someone who knows to ask the right questions, uh, who waits for the answers, is not in a rush to get the answer or give the answer. So, a good process worker, a good drama therapist will ask a question to a room, doesn't get the answer, uh, will not be quick to say, "Oh, this is what the answer is." We'll just change. We'll change tracks. We'll find another way of asking, another way, and then another way, and then another way, until the answer comes from the person. And this idea of really trusting that each of us have the answers to our lives within ourselves. I found it philosophically really really superior, as opposed to just the kind of teaching that we often have gone through most of our lives, where we are told what the right answer is. We kind of nudged towards thinking in a certain way. And uh, and it's only in retrospect that once I came to Bombay and I started auditioning here and working here as an actor for films again, that I realized, my God, how much of that training, in a very different space. It was, in terms of intervention and therapy and correctionals, uh, and pedagogy. I mean, it became the thing that made me audition completely differently when I came into the room, and I realized that truly it was one of the best preparations that I could have had as an actor. Being able to understand also how to be a team player. Often a scene is, you'll really shine in the scene if you're not focused on yourself at all. Your focus needs to be on something else, on your co-actor, very often. And being an enabler, being someone who is really comfortable and realizes that what can I do to support this situation the best,
Right.
and how can I change tracks because what I just did isn't working, you know
Mm-hmm.
and my reaction. So it really makes you think in a very collaborative kind of way, and I think that's really what changed
Right.
changed performance for me.
Right.
uh, and in prison you are serving time, and cinema is nothing but uh, how you experience time.
So, Tilotama, speaking about experiencing time through cinema, sculpting in time, so to say, the way I think Tarkovsky puts it. When you talk about experiencing a story, I mean, when we as audience, we watch a film on screen, we're experiencing it in time, and the characters in the film are also living through a certain time and living through a gamut of emotions in their daily routine, etc. So if we take the case of Is Love Enough Sir, one of your recent films that has been much talked about, there are so many nuances to the character that you've portrayed in the film. And you've mentioned recently about how women of marginalized sections are often not portrayed as women with desire. Desire is
Yeah.
such a huge part of what we experience every day, day in and day out in our real time, that's often just sidelined and put into boxes on screen. And sometimes we also feel that women from oppressed sections are often occupy very, very functional spaces in our stories on screen. If there's a maid, she is just there to help in the house. She sometimes just fades into the montage. You don't really explore more to these characters, especially when it comes to desire. So do you feel that mainstream films generally have a gaze that looks at marginalized lives with a sense of doom all the time, and that there is not enough depiction of wholesomeness or joy or desire when it comes to how mainstream cinema looks at marginalized lives on screen?
I don't think it's just not just a shortcoming of mainstream. I think it's just a shortcoming of us as a generation, and I don't think it's, I mean, this you can make mainstream cinema some kind of villain that's just not getting the plot. I don't think that's the case. I think we're an extremely class bound society with too many skeletons in our cupboard, and we are just so classist that, and even if you took class out for a moment in the conversation, we are so uncomfortable with desire, uh, about talking about desire, about expressing our own desire. It's so coded in what is permissible and not permissible. And then, even when you want to be reactionary, it is often so extreme that it's so unattractive to someone who's, somewhere in the middle. Uh, like feminism has got such a bad name because of so many of its proponents being so rabid and extreme. And it's not a song, it's often a shout. And sometimes you're just tired of the shouts, and this, having to scream to make a point. I'd rather sometimes, when it becomes too loud, just read a book, and hear the same thing, understand the same thing a little with gentleness. I mean, look at the year we've had. Look at the number of
Yeah.
people we have lost. Okay, so now if you want to come to me, if you get to me a film that I find is regressive, now how am I going to say that? Oh, this is a terrible script. This is like so regressive, and it's very easy to stand in judgment of something without understanding the context from which, in which the person was raised and has written something. I really do think that while all our whatever that we believe in and want to express is really important, the way we do it is also very important. Um, so when it comes to, I feel like the idea of desire, I feel we are so clumsy in expressing it, uh, that we often fall in two categories. One is extremes, just extremes to the stalkerish kind of love, which is just like, I'm gonna die without you, and just like I'll slit my wrists, and uh, kind of thing, or or the kind that is so pure and so just loving and eternal, and so there's these tendencies to like put it in some kind of trope and make it, comfortable, or make it so sensationalized, like, like in this film, there'll be 300 times we will abuse, okay, like, but why? What is happening that one has to abuse 300 times,
Absolutely. Yeah.
or yeah, in this character, like, so ma'am, if you will read the script, we'll send it to you, but just want to say there's nudity, huh? Okay. Wow, that's a great way to, make me feel really uncomfortable. Whereas if you had just asked me to read the script and said that after you read the script, if you have any questions or concerns, let's talk about it. The director would be very happy to talk to you, about how he plans to shoot something, or and if I came across pages where it says that, nudity is required, I won't even think about it, man. So what happened here in this sentence? The person was saying it out of the goodness of their, but it's just clumsy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's just
Absolutely.
clumsy, right? Because we are so uncomfortable with what, with being naked. Or is it that we can't portray nudity without it being uh, voyeuristic, cheap, titillating? So is it an aesthetic? Is it a lack of aesthetics? Because why otherwise would, from the casting person onwards, this culture of, sidestepping around it, or like, um, or asking questions like, binaries, like, you're okay with nudity or you're not okay with nudity. I'm like, I'm not okay with this question. It's not about nudity or not nudity, it's just the fact that you've made now the whole film about nudity.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But what is the film trying to say?
Absolutely.
Sell that to me. If I buy
Absolutely.
that, the politics of the film, I will stand on my head, forget taking my clothes off. So I feel like this comes not from someone who is not feminist or not empowered or a person who's bad. It's about just sometimes being clumsy, you know and just not knowing.
Yeah.
So I don't want to, it's not okay to be woke and raise your eyebrow at someone who says that
Yeah.
Absolutely.
uh,
Absolutely.
that, ma'am, there's nudity. I would want to have a dialogue with that person, that, what, next time, no, don't do this, yeah. Because is your film only about nudity? No, no, ma'am, it's about this child who wants to go to school. I said, yeah, man, talk about that now. Next time, don't tell an actor this, because it sounds shady. I know you're not shady.
Yeah.
So it starts from this very just nomenclature around and language and just speaking about desire. We are so awkward about it in our day-to-day lives. So obviously when you express it on cinema and on the screen, uh, it carries that same thing.
Absolutely.
Now you bring into it class, okay, in a society which is so classist, that it's like, oh shit, okay, I know in India we are like, we pay very little to our staff and all that. But now to even acknowledge the fact that the staff also has desires, already it's irritating that they want holidays when they're sick and dying, you know. Uh, Already it's so hard. Like, I don't know, like in America, they have health insurance. I mean, come on, yeah. I don't have health insurance. Like, I have to get health insurance for my maid. And she's taking so many holidays. Yeah, they in inverted commas, they now like, they're like that only. Yeah, you can't trust them. Like, they like, I just gave her the salary. Next day she's gone. For a holiday. You know, and keep having kids. You know, so now these are the things we hear, right?
Yeah.
Now in this mix, you want me to also acknowledge that, oh my god, I opened the door and maybe she was masturbating. What's the big deal? Have you never masturbated?
Absolutely.
Are you
Mm.
so shocked that someone who doesn't belong to your social class, i.e., is poorer than you, so you can't, forget cinema? I just think it's a social, it's a malaise of our the times that we live in and the country that we live in, where um, even within the same class, we are just so clumsy and awkward when it comes to desire. Um, and I don't even mean sexual desire. Often, one is not even able to aesthetically distinguish, because desire means it must be sexual. You know,
Yeah.
well, I'm just crazy about someone like Chris Vine was my teacher. I don't feel anything sexually towards him, but I literally waited for 3 years to get a scholarship, left a career which, after Monsoon Wedding, and I had two films and I could have really come to Bombay, but I was obsessed, and it's a different kind of desire, right? Now it's not, but we so I think it's that clumsiness just comes into the storytelling then, and then you have to, and when you are like with Sir, that was the whole fear, that that when you live in a society in which desire is so coded, and then the film is about class and desire. At one was very careful it's very measured and structured. The film Ratna is very dignified. Imagine a world, I would love to be an actor in a world where our country has evolved to the point where Ratna is not so dignified. Can you accept that then? Right now, people have loved Sir because Ratna is very, very dignified. And you almost feel like, man, you really want her to win, you know? You want her to be able to have that designer job and have the man, and, but imagine if Ratna was not that, you know, would you still accept it?
Yeah.
So I think this film was it had its, it was very calibrated for this reason, because we are very aware of how it's going to be very easily open to, it can easily become voyeuristic. It can easily become, are we romanticizing being poor? So poor people can be happy, rich aren't happy. Uh, so that thing, was a very, and I think Vivek Gomber, like I think I've talked about this many times, but it was very crucial in the way Vivek played Ashwin, uh, which was that whenever I did the scenes with him, and especially in the audition, when I auditioned, we auditioned together, what was really startling about his audition is, in his performance, there was, it's like being aware of being good and being unaware of it, two
Yeah.
very, very different things, right?
It
Uh,
it
he
didn't it didn't come from a place of being a savior complex. Like, yeah,
Absolutely,
he wasn't just.
absolutely. And even in the audition, and also because Vivek Gomber is that kind of person, where it's not like, look, I came on time, I'm such a good person. It's just, it's a done thing to come on time, right? Or like, yeah, just come, let's eat. And you sit on a table. Let's say this is a scene in a film. You see two people and you say, come, let's eat. And, we eat a meal on the table, and I go to my room, and the person goes to their room, opens out a whole doll, and it's sleeping on the floor. So you realize, oh, and then or you see, you eat the meal, and the next thing you know is that the person is cleaning up the room, and the other person is working on a computer. So you realize, okay, this one person in this relationship works on a computer, seems to have an office job. The other person is doing the dishes, cleaning, but they sat on the same table without explaining anything. No,
Yeah.
you created a certain way of life
Yeah.
without explaining anything. We are so nice, in our house. Nay, nay, please, Gauri, you have to come and sit. हम सब इक्वल है, हमारे घर में ऐसे नहीं चलता है, हम अपने मेट्स के साथ टेबल पे खाते हैं. You made sure you have understood that we are really progressive. Yeah, and we are very different. We are not like the others. I'm such a good guy that I even fell in love with my maid.
Oh my God.
It's very different from a man who said, look, man, I fell in love, now it's a mess,
Yeah.
right? Because I don't even know if what I'm doing is going to make your life worse, because it could be really selfish, because I'm really also, I come from a lot of privilege. So am I even allowed to feel this towards you without wrecking your life? Forget the repercussions it will have on mine, because I can handle it. I come from privilege.
Yeah.
So I think that was,
Yeah.
what made Sir interesting and problematic, and both, to want to do it.
I think a lot of also like what my next question was going to be, and it was also about how you called out recently a troll on Twitter. And I don't want to get into that incident because honestly, it's just become so commonplace to say this, and the kind of entitlement. Really, it's not even so much about your thinking; it's about how you feel like you can go up to a person and say that.
That's fine. I mean, we've entered a social contract when we enter social media, and I don't think it's such a, like, like we said, if forget social media, we should just learn to talk nicely to people,
Yeah,
and especially if we consider ourselves to be woke, and thinking about things more so. We should not roll our eyes and look down on people who don't are not using the same kind of fancy language, like deconstruction and utopia, and and the panopticon, and it doesn't make you more evolved, necessarily, because at the end of the day, how are you behaving with the people in your life? you
yeah,
know so for me, what really irked me was, that maid was meant to be an insult.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was just the
Yeah.
dialogue I wanted to have. I don't
Mm-hmm.
really, like, people are free to express how they want. I don't agree with it that people should be nasty and mean, yeah, under any circumstance. But if that's what they that's the garbage they want to put in, that's the garbage that will come out. So it's just cause and effect, and it's at the end of the day personal. But what really irked me about that was, and the reason I chose, and there were many other comments also, which I was like, yeah, whatever. Say, oh, you're a failed actress. I've never even heard of you before this. I know so many people have not heard of me. Like, before Sir came out, like, it was only family and friends saw films. So what are you? Nothing new. That you don't know me. How can that upset me? You know. But what really upset me was, come on, man. Like, I just did a film where I just it felt just like, God, like,
Yeah.
you have all those conversations, do all those interviews, only to hear then that you know you're a flop actress who looks like a maid. Like, that looks like a maid was just like,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
come on.
Steeped in
Yeah,
classism and casteism and
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Tilotama, in the middle of all this, like you said, we are in the middle of, we're in a time where, especially if you engage on social media, etc., your thoughts are getting filtered, they're getting called out. We're also trying to check our own language for political correctness. We're trying to make sure that the language that we use doesn't become the first barrier or first carrier of trauma to somebody else. We're trying to be mindful of what somebody else might be feeling, and we're trying not to dump our own traumas on other people, protecting ourselves, drawing our boundaries. So being an actor in this age and being an actor in the middle of this social media explosion, etc., how do you channel and protect your emotional boundaries, and how do what is a process for you as a person? How do you ground yourself so that when you encounter a character that probably doesn't come from the social space that you come from, how do you sort of approach those characters, and how do you ground yourself enough to understand that I have to understand this character with empathy, and I don't have a right to sort of bring my prejudices to the space, etc., because we're all in the middle of, we're all molded by our conditionings and everything, and at the end of the day we are a society that's pretty moralistic and pretty proprietary, especially of women. So how do you, as an actor, being in a career that requires you to be fluid, how do you ground yourself when you approach your characters?
um, I think a desire to seek out people who I find can teach me something that I don't know has always been a very grounding influence. So, and whether it's seeking out certain books, or seeking out certain people, not necessarily from the world of performance or acting. um that has I think just people like it's nice as you grow older to cherish and actively seek out the company that you want to keep, and because it's not something that is accidental. Who we choose to hang out with, who we choose to engage with, what we choose to watch. When we switch on with the remote, we have the control, but do we? So I think these are choices that one has to exercise very carefully. And I think uh, in this time that we live in, which has this illusion of so much of choice, uh, one needs to have that discernment to see that, okay, what am I really looking for, and what do I want to feel, and which may mean that I don't even have to switch on my TV. For the way I'm feeling right now, I need to actually just go for a walk in the park and perhaps just talk to the gardener, how he's doing. I need to take a auto ride, find out, what's happening uh, with business for small business owners, daily wage workers. I might want to just, interact with my neighbors. Um, it becomes like, I think these are things that I wasn't very conscious about, because you kind of take for granted, yeah, they're my friends, and I hang out with my friends, and I watch TV, then I'll do, you know, I'll work. And I think this I've become I've become very conscious about that. Like I really, you have to invest if you want. Like I spent a lot of time the last year with old people, and I realized that I wasted a lot of time not asking them the right questions because they had so much to share, and so these things become, these things ground you,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's like your curiosity, uh, that is very grounding, because anything, when you're curious about something, somebody, it asks you to invest a certain amount of time in it, and that slows down the pace of getting somewhere.
I think, now that we're sort of coming towards the end of this episode, and what is one takeaway, honestly, that Sukanya and I speak on both of ours' behalf, is how important it is to ask the right questions and sort of sit with the right questions, and stay with them, learn from them, not ask them in a manner always. I mean, we constructed this episode to be about indie films, and it ended up being so much more than that. And for that, we are so beyond thankful, Tilotama, that you spoke to us so candidly and actually really steered the conversation in a way that we could not have planned it even if we wanted to. So, thank you so very, very much, Tilotama, for all of the time that you've given us and for how candid you have been on this
Not just
episode.
candid, I think Nishta, she's also been so she spoke. She's Tilotama. You've spoken with so much intent that we've also, like, I'm sure that this conversation and the nuances of these conversation are going to sort of linger in our minds even after we, switch off this call and go about our daily routine. We're going to look at, I don't know, there's so much. It just, like Nishta said, I don't think we could have planned this if we had planned this also. So it's, thank you so much for being so,
Not at
for
all.
speaking with so much intent about your work, and like taking it inwards. And I don't know how to put it in words, but then it's this has been a very, very pleasant conversation.
Thank you so much, Tilotama, for coming today and for giving us your time. It was a pleasure having you and speaking with you.
Same here. Thank you. Thank you so much for being patient and continuing to. I'm sorry it took so long for us to get.
Not at all. And to everybody who's listening, thank you so much for listening in. We will be back with another episode next to next Thursday. As always, you can subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you so much for tuning in.